What's up, everybody? It's Powershift Media. I'm Matt.
I'm Nathan.
And what we're doing today is we are doing a comprehensive DSM guide. What we're discussing is it a DSM? And by that, there's a lot of common misconceptions on what is and isn't a DSM. There's been some people in Facebook groups claiming Evos are DSMs, Galant VR4s are DSMs. We are here to set the record straight once and for all, and then afterwards actually discuss buying and maintaining these cars, things you should look for in the first and second generation DSMs. My bad. As well as what you need to know keeping them going, maybe even a little bit of modifying. Take it from here.
Oh yeah, pretty much. We'll get technical, what technically is a DSM, what is considered a DSM that isn't technically a DSM. So we'll just kind of start going over those, what are actually produced under the DSM moniker versus Mitsubishi, so like starting off, for instance, this is a 1995 Eclipse. It was produced under the DSM moniker. 1996 was the last year. After that, it was dissolved. DSM was no more. So even though vehicles produced after 1996 all the way up until 99 in the Eclipse, they're still classified under a DSM because, at one point in time they were produced under that partnership, which after that they technically were all Mitsubishi motor. Even the Eagle Talon from 97 to 98 was a Mitsubishi Motors, that's who made that car. Even though it was a DSM, that's actually the company that it was produced under. Legal name, it was produced under Mitsubishi Motors. I know it's kind of confusing and we're gonna, try and bring that to light, but this is the biggest part where we see the argument all the time. Evos, not a DSM. Galant VR4s, not a DSM. 3000 GT, not a DSM. However, there are some other vehicles that are, and we'll get to that are actually produced under the DSM name. Doesn't matter if it was produced in the same factory. Everything that is a DSM actually had a fender badge or inside the door, on the inside of panels, certain body panels, that actually were marked DSM. They say DSM on the sticker and then they have the VIN number. That was the insignia for DSM. That was the partner, the venture between Mitsubishi and Chrysler. That's all that it was. DSM is not just Eagle Talon, Plymouth Laser, Mitsubishi Eclipse. It goes a little bit beyond that because of the actual technical partnership. We know the Eagle Talon, Plymouth Laser, and the Mitsubishi Eclipse as DSM, which is not, it's not the only thing, but it's not incorrect either. It is correct, they are DSMs. However, there are other vehicles as well that, technically are DSMs. Even though common conception is that they're not, or I see people getting flamed or anything like that getting made fun of because they say vehicles are a DSM and people actually don't know. So this is just kind of bring to light, the whole entire situation of what actually is and what actually isn't. So, trying to think here.
Kind of just starting out, the DSM thing, that was the Diamond Star Motors, and that's what that acronym stands for. Basically, the cut and dry of it is DSMs were solely produced in Normal, Illinois. That was the factory they were produced in. So if a car was not produced in Normal, Illinois, definitively it is not a DSM. That's one of the big takeaways right off the rip. Like the first generation cars, like there's one out of the shot here. There's a first generation B-body Talon. These are definitively DSMs. All of your first generation cars were in fact DSMs. As he said, the Dodge Stealths and such, those were not DSMs. That's just kind of a quick primer right away. There's really no gray area on that. You start getting into gray area on your second generation cars.
Yep, I'm going to step out of frame here. We actually have a list. Perfect.
this is where things start getting extremely interesting.
And this isn't anything new. I mean, there's guys that have made, diagrams showing over the years what technically is and isn't, a DSM. So I'm going directly off of, you can go to Google, search it. It literally took me like 5 minutes, just to figure this out because I knew that it existed. But if you don't, that's where we're kind of going to help shed some light on this.
We can even probably put the screenshot in the video.
Yeah, I'll actually link this picture just right in the video. That way it's like a quick reference to come back for anybody that's, curious. So from 1989 all the way to 95, that's DSM partnership of, the Eagle Talon, Plymouth Laser, Mitsubishi Eclipse. That was the time frame for those particular vehicles. Diamond Star Motors was developed a little bit earlier than that, which I don't think that they actually produced any vehicles under, DSM then. It was kind of all prototyping and, developing, creating the partnership and everything on that line. However, they started manufacturing in 1989. 1989 saw the Eclipse, the Talon, the Laser, Mitsubishi Mirage sedan, Dodge and Plymouth Colt sedan, as well as the Eagle Summit sedan. Those were all technically produced under the DSM name. That means that they're going to, on any of the fender work, the bumpers, doors, and the door jambs, everything is going to say DSM on that little VIN number. That to me signifies being a DSM. It was produced under DSM. They're going to have those badges. That means DSM. The vehicles that weren't produced under DSM in this era were the Galant, the Mirage hatchback, the Dodge and Plymouth Colt hatchback, the Eagle Summit hatchback. Those were all manufactured by Mitsubishi. At the same time, the Mighty Max, the Ram 50, and the Montero were all, still Mitsubishi produced. So if there's any kind of misconception on that line, that's, starting in 89. All those vehicles that were made by Mitsubishi or, by Diamond Star Motors. The Mirage sedan, Dodge and Plymouth Colt sedan, and the Eagle Summit sedan were all produced under the DSM name until 1992. Anything after that, Mitsubishi Motors. So up until 92, that's where it cut off. Up until from 89 to 92, they were produced under DSM. That was technically a DSM. The one that sees a lot of hate, the Dodge Avenger and the Chrysler Sebring Coupes. Not the Chrysler Sebring sedan, but the coupe only and the Dodge Avenger. For 1995 and 1995 only were produced under DSM. They will have the DSM markings, and technically, yes, they don't have the 4G63, never did, unless you swap one in, but they never had the 4G63, but are still, yes, technically DSM. They were produced under that partnership. They will have the markings. It is what it is. It's a DSM is a DSM to me. It doesn't matter.
That's where a lot of confusion.
So there is a lot of confusion. Anything after that, it was Mitsubishi Manufacturing of America, Mitsubishi Motor Manufacturing of America. So yes, that people can be right and people can be wrong, just depending on the year split. It all depends. So that's one that I see a lot of argument over. That were, oh, they're not a DSM, blah, 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 they're just made in the same factory. However, there's other vehicles that were made in the same factory that weren't DSM because they were produced by Mitsubishi in the same factory in Normal, Illinois. However, during the same time, DSM, Chrysler, and Mitsubishi were producing vehicles out of the same, factory. So that's where a lot of confusion and misconception comes in, where the DSM and Mitsubishi, like kind of that gray area of the line, kind of gets blurred between certain models. So this is kind of our way of helping to kind of clear it up. It's been discussed for years and years. This is just kind of our take on that.
Exactly.
the Mitsubishi Galant from 1994 to 1995 was a DSM. Before that, the Galant VR4, those were all made by Mitsubishi. So they were not a DSM, even though it had the 4G63, had the same transmission, same, the same drivetrain. It was not a DSM. So, however, 94 to 95, they didn't offer the Galant VR4. It was, your basic Galants, which I believe would have had the 4G64 and the, the V6 option. So those technically, even though they didn't have the 4G63 then, were still technically a DSM, the same way that the Avenger was, or the Sebring. 1995, all the way up until 95, the Eagle Talon and the Eclipse were all DSMs. From 89 to 95, the Eclipse and the Talon only, those were all, because in 95 they didn't have the laser, so this is, I'm breaking it down. Eclipse and Talon, 89 to 95 were all DSM through that entire region. That didn't matter what engine they came with, didn't matter when it was produced, they were all a DSM. After that, 95 to 99 in the Eclipse, Mitsubishi. Even though it's still, we call them a DSM because they were produced under DSM, technically are not a DSM. It is strictly a Mitsubishi. The Eagle Talon, same case from 95 to 98 because 98 was the last year. A lot of guys know that they are the most rare. They are, the most sought after, or amongst the most sought after vehicles in the DSM lineup. And they're, even me, I'm saying, in the DSM lineup, we just know them as a DSM. However, from 96 to 98, they were manufactured by Mitsubishi. So
to clear it up, the 95s were DSMs for the model year, but starting in model year 96 on, they were MMA cars.
Correct. Yep. In 1995 was the last year that you could buy a true DSM Talon. That was the last year. The very first year for the second gen was the last year for a DSM Talon. So technically they were pretty rare themselves if you think about it. They're a 1 year only, produced under the DSM name.
Exactly.
So, with that being said, we haven't gone over the Laser. The Laser, didn't, survive into the second generation. They had, Chrysler had other, obligations. They had the Neons and, that had the same platform as the 2G, so they kind of followed that, which everybody knows that the Neons were crazy popular. I loved them growing up, so it's just one of those things. I think Chrysler didn't feel the need to, chase one in the Dodge lineup or the Plymouth lineup. So
yeah, they had the other two already, so it made more financial sense to kill off the Laser and bring on that new platform.
Correct. The Eagle, survived the longest. The Talon is what carried Eagle out until it, was axed as a, a manufacturer. So, that was what kept them afloat in that aspect on Eagle. The Laser, 1989 to 1994. From the entire time that it was produced, the Plymouth Laser. Not the previous generation Chrysler Laser, that was totally different. But the Plymouth Laser, under DSM, from 1989 to 1994, the entirety of its run was, in fact, a DSM. Out of all of the three, the Plymouth Laser, the Eagle Talon, and the Mitsubishi Eclipse, the Plymouth of all of them were technically the only ones that were fully DSMs. That, out of the entire line, when they ran, from their entirety, when it began to when it ended, that was the only one of all the vehicles that were truly a DSM.
Yeah, they never were anything but a DSM.
Correct. So it's just kind of a way to shed some light on it, and I'm a huge Laser fan. You can't really see it, but I have one sitting right back there.
Yes.
I just think that out of all, for some reason, is cool because it's a Plymouth. When you think, DSM, a lot of guys will instantly jump to the Eclipse or the Talon, but in fact the Plymouth Laser was the only one that the entirety of its run was, in fact, only a DSM. So
it kind of makes me want to do a quick segue because a lot of the older time DSM enthusiasts know this, but I've seen a lot of misconceptions on newer age DSM guys. They see, and this segues like to the Plymouth Mitsubishi thing. Back in the 80s, there was the Mitsubishi Starion, which we didn't get in America, but we got the Chrysler Conquest, which was essentially the same car. Even though Chrysler had that Mitsubishi variant of their own car, those absolutely were not DSMs.
Correct.
People put 4G63s in them. You can race those at the DSM shootout because you're putting a 4G63 in it. Even though those two cars existed as kind of the same entity, those were not DSMs. I just wanted to touch on that for sure.
Chrysler was only importing them from Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi was manufacturing them in Japan. Chrysler was importing them and branding them under Chrysler. That was totally different than the partnership between Mitsubishi and Chrysler through DSM.
Yeah, those Conquests didn't have 4G63s in them. I mean, they were really amazing cars, and they have quite a following behind them, but at the end of the day, they are not DSMs.
And then that's an awesome segue for the next part that is a huge common misconception is the third gen Eclipses.
Yes.
They, in fact, were not anything to do with, anything obviously after 95, the 96 was the last year, so anything after that, it didn't matter, was, not a DSM. Just because it was an Eclipse, not a DSM. A lot of common misconception in the fact that people try and compare them to the second generation or the first generation, which I can understand. If you're new to the game, you think, oh, well, it's just an Eclipse, so it's got to be the same as the first and the second generation. Kinda, but, they were never produced in that same time that DSM existed, so that's where they're, disregarded as never being a DSM. They were strictly Mitsubishi Motors.
Right. They were hardly even Eclipses. I mean, third gens, you couldn't get turbocharged. Right. You could not get all-wheel drive variants. They did, and this is where a lot of that comes in, they did get the 4G64 engines, which, well, they're very much based on the 4G63 with just a different stroke and some other differences. You could also get the 6G72 from the 3000 GT, which, as we now know, was never a DSM entity, but the 64s were. So, even though it had that technically DSM engine, we don't like to even think of those cars as Eclipses. We're not hating, but they're the Eclipses to us enthusiasts were 90 to 99s.
There's guys that tune them, but technically in the aspect of a factory turbocharged engine, they're just not as, tunable. There's guys that, swap the 4G63 head on them, then they turbo them and tune them. It's been done. There's guys that do it. Mm-hmm. But as, if you were to go and buy an actual turbo car, you don't have to worry about, changing out to a turbo setup. They're not as tunable in that aspect. Not that you can't make power with them, but from an enthusiast aspect, it's just not one of the vehicles that we would go to for the simple fact that the first and the generations already exist. Had they not, then it would have been a more viable option. But when the 1Gs and the 2Gs exist, why go for a third gen or later Eclipse? It's just
they're just not revered in the aftermarket. I mean, at the end of the day, they, as he stated, they were overshadowed by their DSM brothers, and honestly, the third gen and on Eclipses were kind of just a black eye for Mitsubishi enthusiasts. Again, if you own one, that's no offense, but that's just kind of the whole setting the record straight. Posting a third gen in some DSM groups literally is grounds for being banned. That is a very sore subject to some enthusiasts.
It's a little over the top to me. But,
yes, I agree, but
because there are guys out there that do have nice cars, and anybody that puts the effort into their vehicle like that is grounds for respect, in my opinion.
I agree. But there's guys that do the all-wheel drive swaps in third gens. I have seen it done, and same with the DSM Sebrings. People have done the all-wheel drive swaps in those, and I love those.
Yeah.
What's not to like really about that?
Because it's still
a DSM. Yeah. Exactly. That car is a DSM.
Right. And even though that people will say, and you know, until they're blue in the face that it's not, you know,
they're wrong. They're very unknowledgeable.
It is.
That's why we're here to try to set this straight. We wanted to kind of set this DSM thing once and for all. Just have this be the end all be all of, is it a DSM? And we also wanted, as we mentioned in the beginning of the video, just to kind of talk about what to look for when you're buying one of these cars, what you should avoid, you know, should you buy a first gen or a second gen. We kind of just wanted to quickly touch on some of that as well, because a lot of the newer guys, you know, we've been doing it a long time. I had my first DSM when I was barely 15 years old, and he had his not long after.
Yep.
And you know, I'm 30 and he's 29, so we're not know-it-alls. It's just we have been immersed in this for a long time. We've made mistakes because we didn't know as well.
right.
I guess kind of, you know, like this is a second generation car right here, as we mentioned. This one's a 95, it's a DSM. Looking for buying one of these, you have to look at whole entirely different things than you do versus buying a first generation car. If we want to roll into that.
Yeah, we'll definitely go into that. You know,
We have a
segue
prime
right in.
example sitting
Yeah,
right outside,
I mean,
actually,
we
unfortunately.
we actually don't have very many stock examples sitting around here.
No.
However, we do have 1G and 2G examples to go over, you know, common spots, common issues that I see people talking about, you know, rust issues, where, you know, when you're going to buy one of these cars, where to look for. The 2Gs and the 1Gs both suffered serious rust issues, common misconceptions between the two and where they rust out. Just kind of going to go over those. We might even put the 1G up in the air. We don't really have access to get a 2G in the air right at the moment because we are still working on the 1G. Just go over some things on the 2G as well. Kind of go over just different things, body, you know, different options that could have come on the body, you know, year range, model range, just kind of go over certain things like that. But this is a great time to just, you know, we'll start on that aspect. So
Absolutely.
we'll segue right into that. Okay, starting with the 1G itself. A very common issue that I see, and everybody knows that DSMs are notorious for strut tower rust. This particular 1G, and all 1Gs in general, didn't suffer the shock tower rust as the 2Gs did. I see a lot of people posting 1Gs for sale, saying that the shock towers are clean. Most of the time, you know, they never even had shock tower issues. Where they do suffer issues, it's kind of in front of the shock towers, between the rail and the actual front frame rail and the inside of the fender, you know, support on both sides. That's a good spot where they will rust. In this particular 1GB, the kind of the front corner of the fenders, they're notorious for rusting in those areas. The 1GAs will get some rust there as well. As far as the 1G, they are pretty bad for having rocker rust. Anytime you look, this particular car is an example where, you know, it does have a little bit of an issue. It is an example of, you know, not horrible, but it kind of shows you to get you an idea of where to look. This goes with the 2G as well. Inside this rocker, you know, inside the wheel well, where the wheel well meets the rocker, and under, you know, the rocker cap itself, the, you know, the body molding and the side skirt. Look for a lot of rust under there. Up in the air, I'll get to it, but they actually rust back by the gas tank, where the gas tanks mount. They will rust where the gas tank filler neck, they can rust out pretty bad.
Mustache bar.
Inside, yeah, the mustache bar for the rear end, if it is all-wheel drive, they will, you know, have some rust issues as well. On the 1Gs, they will also rust out really bad around your door open chime button there, but they will rust around in here. That's a good place to look, you know, to see the condition under the rocker. It kind of gives you it doesn't always say for sure, but it gives you an idea of, you know, the condition possibly. as far as that goes, pretty much that's the main rust issue areas on a 1G. They don't really rust in a whole lot of areas. They just get really bad down the rockers, you know, on the fenders, back by the gas tank, and that's pretty much it, you know. So they just get, you know, pretty bad. They were good in the snow, they were good in the winter, they were popular in Ohio here. So they just got drove and they got used and they, you know, eventually rusted out.
1G is just more see the scale, not so much the rust you'll kind of see on the bottoms of these. These weren't quite as bad, like you're saying. These just get more of the scale, so if you just descale them and address it when you get the car, chances are you'll have a good car for a long time.
Yep, definitely. And that's kind of the plan with my red car, the Barn Find Talon from the very first video that I did. Yes, I still have it. Yes, I'm slacking on it. I haven't been able to, you know, get anything done to it, but yes, I still do have it. I still want to put it back together and make it a, you know, a prime example of a great DSM driver. And here we are on to the 2G. This is actually a customer car of mine here that's at the, you know, here in the garage. You can tell it's got some mods. This isn't something to go over the mods list on this car, but you can tell that he's, you know, serious about this and is about doing stuff a little more correctly and, you know, not going about in a less expensive route. He's, you know, no corners cut, good quality stuff. As you can already tell right off the bat, 2Gs, strut tower issues. This one has pretty solid strut towers. I don't know. This is how it was when it came here. This is how it was when he got it. The other strut tower doesn't appear to be in all that bad of shape. This one has a little bit of a hole that they tried to patch or do something, but overall condition, this one doesn't have the side skirts on it where it would have originally come with them, but it is really nice and solid down, you know, down the rocker itself. So, I mean, the car is solid. It was kind of neglected over the years. A guy, you know, cut the trunk pan out of it and they were going to make it into a drag car. So we can't really show, you know, the trunk pan area, which, you know, was notorious for rust in the 2Gs. This one I will show you as well. Down inside the rocker, you know, rocker where the wheel well meets the rocker. That is a notorious spot on the DSMs as well, or the 2Gs. This one you can see got a little bit of a spot there, kind of starting to show through, but not too horrible at all. Kind of bring her into focus there. But I've seen them where they're rusted out all the way up to that body plug. The body plugs are gone. Just kind of one of the main things. If you come back to a car and it's supposed to be clean and it has nice shock towers, I've seen them where the shock towers are still nice, but they're, you know, they're rusted out in that area, and that's a dead giveaway that the car is, you know, maybe not that you want to pass on the car, but you definitely know that you're probably going to have to swap the shell or get very extensive in your rust repair, you know, efforts. So
in my opinion, if I was going to buy that second gen, if I was looking at a car that looked this nice on the surface, my opinion, I would jack it up and I'd take the back wheels off it and I would actually inspect. And I would just get a good look in there. If you have the wheels off, you can get a look. And if the seller's apprehensive to let you take the wheels off, chances are you should probably walk away.
Right. So, I mean, that's definitely a great aspect to look at as well. Interior-wise, the airbags, they're notorious for, you know, kind of peeling up. The factory foam kind of delaminates from the metal underside. The dashes can kind of split. They're not notorious for splitting, but I have seen 2G dashes split. Pretty much there's not a whole lot on the inside that goes bad with these. It's just the maintaining them, keeping them clean.
Right.
Rust issues, that's the biggest thing.
The thing with most of these, the interiors do hold up pretty good. The 1Gs get the cracked dashes. They're, you know, these cars are edging 30 years old now. finding like a first gen without a cracked dash is pretty hard. The second gens, as you said, are definitely a little better for that. It does happen, but if you buy one of these, you almost expect it's going to rattle. That's just almost part of the experience of driving these things. They were like that when they were newer cars.
Right.
You get used to all that, but as far as like the interior quality and holding up, I mean, they're pretty decent as far as that goes. They crack a lot less than other vehicles we've owned.
Yep, and going on the reliability of these cars, they're constantly being said where, they're unreliable, they're constantly breaking down, they don't run. And that was, it's not a misconception because they, had their issues, they had their quirks. They are aging now, but even before they were, really old, when they were 10, 15 years old, they were still having issues. People, mainly it was the reliability of the owner. They did have certain issues, certain recalls. However, in the long run, it's no different than any other vehicle. If you maintain it, you treat it properly, they are going to endure, whatever you put them through. So
let's quickly jump into something that's very hot. I think you know where I'm going. A big debate is the whole, the first gens and the 6 bolts and 7 bolts versus the second gens with the 7 bolts. And right away, a lot of these newer guys come in the community. Well, I don't want a 2G, they crank walk. What's your thoughts on crank walk? Because I can definitively tell you Jake Montgomery only runs 2G 7 bolts.
Right.
He's come out and said he will only run 2G 7 bolts, and Devin Schultz was always running 2G 7 bolts.
The technical crank walk issue, yes, it was real. Yes, there were recalls for it. However, it was specifically for a certain batch of engines that were mismachined in the thrust area of the block. That was it. There is no other, issues in just the 4G63 world itself. It doesn't matter if you starve an engine of oil, if you don't do proper oil changes, you can wear out the thrust surface on the crank and on the bearing. It doesn't matter what engine it is. I've seen V8s crank walk, I've seen 4-cylinders crank walk. It doesn't matter. This particular issue was a mismachining. They were recalled. I believe all of them were actually recalled and done, or bought back. And, I don't know what they did with them, if they just crushed them after they bought them back. However, the true crank walk issue has been addressed back in, the 90s.
It is not that widespread of a thing. And I want to annotate, I know Devin ran the 7 bolts in the Red Demon. It might not have been Jake, so if I misquoted that, I apologize, but I can definitively tell you Devin's been running strictly 7 bolts.
Correct.
And for anybody who, I don't like 7 bolts, well, then I suppose you don't like Evos, because all Evos ran 7 bolts.
From day one.
Day one, Evos strictly had 7 bolts.
Going on that as well, on the crank walk issue, if you're familiar in the DSM world, I'm sure that you've heard the name Jaffro Mobile. He went through in depth on tearing down an engine, that was crank walked, and went over a huge aspect of back in the day when these cars were new, people were putting heavy duty clutches in them.
Bingo. People
were just doing aftermarket stuff, and they were leaving out what was considered the crank walk bolt. He goes into depth with, fully in depth with that, and I don't want to go, too technical with it. However, when you actually put the transmission back in, there's a small bolt on the back side of the transmission. That is, even though it's a very small bolt, it is a very important bolt. Yes. People were leaving those out just because, it's just a small bolt. I got 3 bolts, and, the bell housing, the top bolts, the bottom front bolt. However, that throws off the torsional load on the clutch and will actually, on a very micro scale, will flex the end of the crank. That will, cause torsional vibration, which causes chatter marks in your bearings, which causes to premature wear in those bearings, which causes, it can wear your thrust bearing, it can wear, your main bearings. It doesn't matter. It can all cause an issue to, emulate, it has crank walk. Well, yeah, technically it crank walked, but it was induced by the owner. It wasn't
a flaw of the engine.
correct. It was not
a flaw of the person maintaining it.
correct. It was not a manufacturing issue. It was an end user issue, which constantly I see it coming up. People are always arguing, oh, well, it's crank walking, blah, blah, blah. The only answer that I ever give them is, if you don't want to make your 7-volt run, you can send them to me. I'll take them, I'll make them run.
And if you're really worried about your 7-volt and you're going to be building a 7-volt, in my opinion, it's pretty cut and dry. Get rid of the neutral safety switch so you're not you're not pushing in the clutch as you start the car. And then you're taking, and I think that goes for any engine. If you have a heavy duty clutch, you want to eliminate that if possible, just to take that load off. I mean, I've heard of BMW E30s crank walking, and those are some of the stoutest engines out there. And a lot of guys, that run these heavy duty clutches, just eliminate that as being a possibility so you can start it without having to depress the clutch. No problem. I think that takes a lot of that out of it anyway, but making sure you have that crank walk bolt in there and just making sure you're taking the steps. And that goes for any engine. No engine is bulletproof. You can crank walk the 6-bolt.
Yep, I definitely agree. And I mean, I'm sure that I'll get arguments. However,
it's just something that needed to be discussed because it's been beat to death.
It has. And seeing it in video over, instead of in messages, and people getting, just messages happen so fast, on a post on Facebook where people don't get to read it. So, in an instance where it's a video, you're listening, going down the line, it's a little bit better to understand. And, in case because it is kind of confusing. It took me, years to figure out, and, actually finding out all this information on my own, not experiencing issues versus what people say. I've experienced failures in engines that shouldn't have happened. I've experienced engines that shouldn't have even ran and did. So it's all going to come down to how the engine, how the car was treated and its, previous owners, how you treat it, how you maintain it. It all comes down to, that. It's just stuff wears out over time. These things aren't getting any younger. Everybody knows them as, slap a turbo on it, even a bigger turbo, throw some link on it, and just, have a good time with it. However, after time, that is going to take a toll on it if you don't maintain it.
I think the big thing, in my opinion, the biggest takeaway, if you're looking at buying a DSM, whether it's a 1G, a 2G, doesn't matter what it is, the best thing you can do to buy one of these and enjoy it is not worrying about going fast off the bat. It's about educating yourself on these cars with videos like this, making sure before you start doing a build on your car that your maintenance is up to date. Has your timing belt been done? Has it been replaced? Have you went through the car? You can't just go throwing a 50 trim on your car, throwing DSM link on it to start tuning it, and not making sure your fuel system's ready for that, not making sure your gaskets are ready for that. That's the biggest thing. Guys will throw these big turbos on here and blow a head gasket, or car won't run right because they just created 48 boost leaks. Go through your car before you start doing these things and you won't have these reliability issues. I can tell you this because I have a 90 Talon myself. That car has over 240,000 miles on it. I daily drove that car for 2 years. I bought it off Nathan, the guy shooting the video. And that car was very ragged out when we got it. And all we spent 1 weekend going through that car. And I upped the fuel system. I went through everything. And that car's let me down 0 times. And it's a pretty well-built car. It's all about going through the car. It's not cheap to do it. I probably have about $5,000 getting it to that point, but I could jump in it and I could go drive it across country, and I would trust the car to get me there.
Right. So it's all in your perception on the vehicle, and knowing if you're coming into the market on these that you're going to have to do work to these to even get them to the required level of starting to mod them. It's not this is an old subject. We're not the first ones to bring this to light, but it seems that there's enough new people coming in. The cars are getting older. People growing up that couldn't, that weren't able to drive, that are, taking interest in this platform. this is all, new stuff. It's been talked about over and over again. DSMtuners.com. That's a huge, archive of great information, builds. It's just one of those things where we constantly see it on Facebook. It's all these questions that are asked over and over and over again. Ever since I've been in this DSM game, it's constantly the same questions. So we're just putting our take on this and, bringing it to light in a lot of misconceptions or, stuff that people aren't quite sure about, just based on our experiences. So, I've got, see the laser over there torn apart, the 2G there. There's a 2G outside the door where it's really bright.
2G.
Yeah, there's another 2G out in the front yard. So, I don't want to say, I'm a super, genius or anything in the DSMs. However, we have a lot of experience in, putting these DSMs together and making them run. So I feel that, we're able to put out a lot better, not better information, but put out a lot of good information where, it can be helpful as well.
I think one of the big takeaways with these cars, and I'm going to make an analogy. Anytime you're buying into something that's more high performance, you have to remember, and I'm not like bashing Hondas, I actually enjoy built Hondas, but you're not buying into a Civic DX, with 117 horsepower. These cars stock back then were quite quick, they were pushing right at 200 horse stock, and over all these years of stoplight launches, people ragging on them, neglecting maintenance. It's like anything in life that you're going to do that requires more. If you want to be a high-performance bodybuilder, you have to maintain that. You can't just, do something 3 times and expect to keep solid gains, just using that analogy. These cars are a lot like that. They're higher performance. If you want to keep them going and get them where you want to be, they're going to require extra care. And if you give them that extra care, they can be as reliable as anything else. I've had new cars that were less reliable than my DSMs. I have never had one of my DSMs actually strand me.
Yep.
And I've had probably 20 of these cars.
Right.
That's just, in my opinion, that's the takeaway. I dislike when people from other communities really like to rag on these. They're jack stand queens. Well, yeah, anytime you have a group of people pushing 800 horsepower through a car that was never designed to do that is inevitably going to happen. That goes for LSs. It doesn't matter what it is. But if you keep up with them and you put the quality parts on them and you're not cutting these corners and trying to push 800 horsepower through a stock drive shaft and you're doing things correctly, you can enjoy it as a built car. Or even if you're just trying to maintain a semi-stock car. It's all about making sure all these things are refreshed. Nothing lasts forever. These cars are as old as I am.
Right.
And I can tell you, I feel my age every day. So, just keep up with them. Treat them the way they deserve to be treated, and you can truly enjoy DSM ownership. It's a very rewarding car to have. In my opinion, I've been lucky enough to drive a lot of amazing cars. Few cars out there have the kind of charm and panache, and I'm a 1G guy, nothing against 2G guys, but nothing really has the panache to drive on one of these. I like the driving position of them, the way they feel. This is an example of one of those older analog cars. It's not going to handle like a supercar or anything, but it has that same type of emotion. So buy one of these and know what the car is at face value, know these things going in, and you'll have an addiction for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
They're a lot of fun, and we love the community, and we'd love to see anybody who's thinking about coming into it, will come into it, but come into it
knowing.
with knowledge.
Yes.
It's like anything else, obsess a little bit about what you're passionate about, and you'll have a nice end product, for sure.
Yep. Well, guys, this is kind of our final take on the whole DSM buyer's guide. A couple other things that we wanted to go over. We were just actually informed by our other friend Casey, who has the 2G out front. Automatics in these, they are really coming into light in the past 5 years or so, where they are being able to they were commonly misunderstood as not being able to handle power, and it's actually almost the opposite, where they, the whole entire time, were they were the brawn, they were the brutes of the DSM, where, a manual constantly, if you don't know how to drive one coming in, you can really shock the drivetrain, just by dumping the clutch without loading the drivetrain, and constantly break axles, break transfer cases, break, rear ends, stuff like that. But not saying that everyone is like that, but if you aren't familiar with the platform and you aren't familiar with, the drivetrain, obviously, even my dad, he's never even owned one, but he knew that they had transmission issues throughout the years, and they were kind of known to be a glass transmission, which in certain instances, they are. If you're abusive to them or you run them a little bit harder than you should, I'm guilty of it. I've broken transmissions, but it's not the fact of it's junk, quality or junk material. It was all in the end user. So, it's constantly one of those debates on the transmissions, the drivetrains. Manuals can be good. Automatics are really coming up through the ranks. There's guys out there that might necessarily, look past the DSM now because they're a manual or they're an automatic, vice versa. However, both of them can be good. They both have their pros, both have their cons. The autos, you got to do your clutch upgrades, do your Force 4 box. I'm not super familiar. You can do shift kits, different things like that, just to go through them. Well, the center diffs like you would in a manual. On the manual end of it, a lot of the parts are now discontinued. You have to buy specialty, higher end, more expensive parts to be able to rebuild a manual transmission now. A good double clutch setup isn't exactly, very inexpensive in that aspect. So they both have their pros and cons, but the autos are definitely, showing their worth. They're actually proving that they can handle some serious power with very little, upgrades, just right off, out of any car. So if you're wondering, manual or auto, they're both good transmissions. Just, go into either one knowing that the auto may need a little bit of upgrades to shift faster to be able to do what you want it to, where the manual, you might have to treat it a little bit, nicer to get it to last. So it kind of comes back to that point where these cars were, 200 horsepower cars from the factory, bigger turbo, fuel system, tune, supporting mods, stuff like that. You're, very easily doubling the output that these cars were never meant to have. So it's just one of those things where you just have to, again, come in, like he said, come in with knowledge. Know that you need to do other stuff other than just make it fast and put power to it, because then you're going to instantly find weaker links, and then ultimately, if you didn't know, that leads to, being able to be disappointed. So
yeah, I'm like, back in the day, we all did kind of ditch the autos. As he said, back then they were kind of shunned. I passed on a lot of really great cars because they were autos, and back then, I mean, it was weird. Some of them had some issues that, as we found out later in life, were really stupid, like TCUs going bad and just little things like that. Back then, nobody was really doing anything with them. We were doing the manual thing, and as he said, as time came on, and he had to shed that light on me like 5 years ago that, autos are kind of where it's at now. Guys like Darren Thomas Racing have been in the 8s on basically just drop-in autos, and to do that with a manual, it's pretty much just not going to happen unless you really upgrade that thing like he said. And guys like Shep aren't really doing them anymore. I know John Ripple's still out there doing them, but you're going to pay for it, and God help you if you want to price out a dog box like what, Devin Schultz is running. You really, no matter what you're going to spend the money, ask yourself what you want the car to do. If you just want a 450 horsepower fun street car, buy a manual. As long as you're treating it right, it'll definitely do it if you're not driving the car like an idiot. If you're wanting to chase a number, if you're trying to put your car in the 8s, and you wanted to semi-reliably do that, I'll say that in air quotes, I would personally recommend an automatic. There's differences between the transes I'm not going to get into. Some of them are stronger than others, but if you're trying to build in my opinion, a purpose drag car, I would recommend going with an auto setup. But if you just want a car to troll around town, have some fun with it, enjoy it as a driver's car with a good amount of power, my car's a 5-speed car, but when I go to set up a purpose-built drag car, I know I'm going to go with an auto. Take that for what it is, but that's just my advice, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and if you are completely fine with putting the money where it counts in a manual, there's nothing wrong with having a manual race car. I drag raced a manual car and was really consistent with it. It just all depends on what your outtake is, what you want to get out of the car, what your goals are. So everybody can build their car the way that they want to. There's like us, we are enthusiasts. It doesn't matter what it is. If you build it the way that you want it, that would make us happy, seeing what, other people's takes on these cars are, and to make them work. So it's cool to us. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Build what works for you. I mean, these cars, the cool thing about these cars is they kind of are a blank canvas. They can pretty much do whatever you want them to do. They can be amazing street cars that you can enjoy, eat up some miles with them. They do have that panache. People appreciate what they are. These cars are, I'll say it, at this point they're pretty well legendary, especially amongst other car communities. And, even if you are shooting for drag numbers and you want to keep a manual, by all means do it. The fastest manual transmission car on planet Earth is a DSM. So don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do it. Just have that knowledge. Know that it's going to take money to get the car where you want it to get. But the big thing that I even had to learn coming up through the community just years back is don't have this really lofty goal and not have a way to get there. Don't have this huge dream of having 500 horsepower and I want to build it on a $2,000 budget because JP Riccio did it. Well, that guy's been doing it for years. He knows what it takes to do it. He has that knowledge. Most average people, that car will end up parted out. So just know what it takes, be comfortable with what it's going to cost monetarily, and enjoy the car as you mod it. Mod it slowly if need be. Enjoy each little upgrade. That's why these cars flourished over the years. We didn't really have a support. Guys like Dave Busher, they were, blazing the trail, and that's why we are where we are now.
Yep,
for sure.
Yeah, so that's just our quick take on this. A little bit of a buyer's guide. We could talk until we're blue in the face. Make a multi-hour long video going over certain other aspects. But that was kind of the main focus points, that come to our mind when, trying to be involved with the community, people asking questions, people maybe with a common misconception. That's the biggest part why we wanted to, state exactly what a DSM was and what a DSM wasn't. That's all basically what we wanted to do, just, kind of put our spin on it. Show that even if you are just new into this, you can still have a support community where people are not too good. I see that a lot of times where it seems like certain people are afraid to give out information, or I see people giving out wrong information all the time. It's just kind of like one of those things where we're not too good to give our information out. We've been in it for a long enough time. Obviously, we don't have any super crazy big race cars or a race team or anything like that. However, building drivable street DSMs, we've been very good at. We've been in the community for combined almost 30 years. So
we're definitely not know-it-alls, and we learn the same way by the guys who blaze that trail. We learn from them. Those are the guys who handed down that gift of knowledge over the years, and that's what we want to do, is just give back. And perfect time to shameless plug our website, powershiftmedia.net. So powershiftmedia.net. If you have questions, don't hesitate to go to the website.
Send us an email.
Hit the contact us button. Shoot us an email, and no matter what it is, DSM related, any kind of car questions, chances are we've probably owned one of them and we can answer. But when it comes to DSMs, between us, we've kind of have done it all. We've done a bunch of different kind of builds. He's built cars from mild to wild, so don't hesitate to reach out. We're very approachable. We're not gonna, tell you, oh, just go to Google. Nah, we're more than happy to help, and we want to see you in one of these cars enjoying them. That's what it's all about. These cars can't exist without us as enthusiasts keeping them going. So if you want one, get it and enjoy it. We don't want to see them sitting around rotting. Drive your cars.
And if you know anybody that has the ability to help reproduce trim pieces, body panels, stuff like that, let us know. Get us in touch with these people, because we need to. That's another huge area in these cars, that they're just not parts or pieces and little factory trim panels. They're just not out there. You have to buy them secondhand. You have to hope that they're in good condition. It's just one of those things where without that part of the community, it's just going to constantly go down to where eventually they're just not going to exist. Or the guys that that have the nice ones, they're gonna be out of the price range. Which, don't get me wrong, I like the fact that these are going up in value. It shows their worth, and it shows that people actually do appreciate them. However, we need to, as a community, also help support and offer these parts and maintain these vehicles the best that we can. So.
Yeah, look out for the community as a whole, and I guess that's a good just segue into just one quick last plug. If you have one of these cars and you're trying to either maintain it or you want to upgrade, if there's some things that you do need fabricated, whether it's exhaust, metal parts, this man right here is a very, very seasoned fabricator, Renegade Performance.
Yep. It's
on our website under the Fabrication tab. Don't hesitate to reach out. Maybe you have one of these cars, you know what you're doing, you have an HX40 on it, and you want a bumper exit or a hood exit, he can make it happen for you.
Yep, all custom. So, that's like this 1G right here. It's getting a bumper exit that is off of an O2 housing that nobody creates. They don't. It was an oddball O2 housing at the time. Nobody even offers hardly a downpipe for it. So we're just going to create a bumper exit for it. That's what he wants. Anything like that. If you have a project, DSM or any other project, that you might be struggling with, or you might be caught up, or you just don't have the time to finish it, that's a lot of these cars as well. I will go pick them up, bring them back, finish them. So it's another kind of a little plug that we can do, Renegade Performance wise. Look out for the community, in the DSMs. It doesn't matter, I've got big single turbo BMW that I went and, picked up, brought back. It's all things that, I'm just helping out the automotive enthusiast, community as a whole. I guess I would say I specialize more in DSMs, but I specialize in, doing good work, making performance mods and doing them correctly, attention to detail. So
don't let your dream die just because you have a lack of time, or like me, I can wrench good enough to do things, but I'm nowhere on his level. I let him do my work, and don't let a dream die because you fear that maybe I can't do this. Well, that's why we're here.
Yep.
And I guess the best thing I can say is just always keep driving your cars, always keep chasing after your dreams. If this is what you want, go out and get it for sure.
Definitely. So yeah, that's our little wrap on the DSM buyer's guide / what is DSM. So with that being said, I think this was an awesome little video that we're able to provide to the community, and hopefully everyone will tune in and kind of join in with all the DSM content that we're going to be able to put out and be involved with. I know that in the previous videos, you've heard me talking about the DSM content, so this is our start back into it again.
If you like the video, be sure to share the video, share in the community, get the knowledge out there, and definitely subscribe. And hit the little bell. That way you can be notified when we put new videos out. We definitely plan to be consistent with videos. Be sure to also check out our podcast on our website. We talk about DSMs, new cars, We cover all of this. So if there's something you want us to cover, if there's a question you have, we'd love to cover it on camera or on a podcast. We're not too good for that. That's why we're here.
Automotive enthusiasts.
That's right. That's all we are.
Well, with that being said, we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for watching.